Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. We'll be talking about scanEZ, advanced tricks and scenarios for administrators. My name is Ben Manessi. I work here as head of products at Whitetria, and I'll be your host today. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Please feel free to use the Q&A section. We'll be sure to get back to you with any sort of questions or feedback. And having said that, let's actually get started. Our agenda for today is rather ambitious. In fact, we'll be talking about 9 different administration scenarios in just under an hour that we hear from administrators frequently about. In fact, I'll be going back and forth between my presentation. We'll look at a problem, we'll look at it live, and we'll hope that we make it on time in just about an hour. Now, the first thing that we'll talk about is an interesting scenario that comes up. And before we go into this one, I do want to say, in case your mail is no longer in Domino, which is the case at some of our customers, don't worry. We'll have a fair mix of mail-related administration scenarios as well as application and generic Domino administration scenarios. So the first example that we'll be looking at today is mail merge. Imagine that your user has deleted a whole bunch of emails and calls you up and says, I need a restore of my mail file, say from last week, because on Friday, I managed to delete a whole bunch of emails. Then you say, okay, let's do the restore, and you provide a link to the customer. They end up looking at the mail file and say, well, I don't know if I can find all of these emails because I deleted a lot of them. Can you please merge them with my production mail file? Now, theoretically, replication could work in this case, but that's kind of a situation where you don't really want to let the genie out of the bottle, right? So not to mention a lot of questions. What happens here with replicas in production and folder assignments? How do you deal with this situation? So let's take a look at this live and head over to my beautiful Domino 10 environment. I'm going to be working with Aaron's mail file. We'll pretend that the deletions took place on the server, and I will use my local replica as the restored version of that mail file. So what we know at this point is that a couple documents have been deleted. We know when because the user told us. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to go ahead and open scanEZ. And then we're going to head over to the deletion stubs section. Now, with the deletion stubs, you can always pull up the deletion stub explorer. That is a tool that gives you the means to locate deletion stubs deleted between 2 given dates, right? Now, because I did all of this morning, I'm not going to use a filter, but this would be a great way to pinpoint those deletions. Now, what we're going to see here later on is we'll see another example with some deleted views, but what I'm primarily interested in at this point is the documents. Now, most of you probably know that using our FlexiGrid, you can easily export and copy anything with a simple Control-C, Control-V. A little bit less of you probably know that you can, in fact, navigate between your selected columns using your arrows, and then you can use a Control-Shift-C to only copy the information from your currently selected column. Now, what I have on my clipboard at the moment is the list of unique IDs of documents that were deleted from this database. I'm going to go ahead and head over to the local replica of this mail file, which, like I said, is my restored version of the mail file. I'm going to pull up scanEZ on it, and we're going to use one of the many search features that is available here. We're going to search using unique IDs. Let me just quickly take a look at. All right, so everybody can hear me. That is perfect. Awesome. So I've got the list of unique IDs of those deleted emails on my clipboard. I just pulled up search by unique ID, and now I'm going to locate those emails by their unique IDs. That is an interesting situation. Okay, what just happened here? And oh man, demo is not starting really well. It looks like I might have replicated this guy. Anyway, let's take a look at this quickly. So just replication options, and looks like it was in fact disabled. So let's take a look at this and just delete a couple of these emails. and then see where we get with that. So the idea essentially here is that we want to locate those emails based on the unique IDs of the those deletion stubs. Just bear with me for a second. Oh, actually, the issue at hand is that I used a different user. Man, oh man, it's yeah, these users look very, very similar in their names. So let's just do this real quick. Deletion stub explorer. Let's take those unique IDs. In this case, I don't have any views, so Control-Shift-C, and then we're going to head over to the local replica, and we're going to see what we get with that. So again, I'm just going to use the unique ID search, and we're going to quickly locate these deleted emails. In fact, we found those alive emails, and then we're going to use the copy or move documents to multiple replicas feature. Now, this is a really cool feature, and we're going to talk a bit about what all we can do here. I'm going to quickly select the destination mail file, that is Aaron's mail file, and then we're going to see what actually happens if I just copy these documents back as new. In this case, if we copy those documents back as new, we'll just create new documents with the same content. They will get a new unique ID, and that's pretty much it. So we will lose the folder structure. We'll lose any sort of parent response situation. So if there is, for example, a reply email to some of these guys, that hierarchy will be lost. So we have actually a bunch of possibilities here. We can copy these emails back as new documents, or we can copy them back replication style. What this means is that we're going to make sure that we keep the same unique IDs that these documents used to have, and override anything that we find in the target database. Now, what we would find holding these unique IDs in the target database are actually deletion stubs. So we would just override them, and that's pretty much it. However, another question about these emails is how would the user go about finding them? Because if I copy them back, we will lose the folder structure. They will not reappear in the folders where they used to belong to, because it's not the documents that know which folder they belong to, but the other way around. For that, we have a pretty awesome feature here on the left where I can pick my target folder. In fact, I could create a new folder, call it restored today, so that all those emails will be deposited into this folder. Or I could say I want to make sure that these documents go back to exactly the same folders that they used to belong to. So what we would do in this case is it would go through the 13 mail documents, look at what documents, what folders they belong to in the restored version, and we will actually even create those folders in the production database if needed, and make sure that they go back to the folders they used to belong to earlier. So that is how we can go ahead and copy these documents back. Now, there's one more thing, which is, let's say I have a clustered environment, or I have some replicas for those production mail files. If I copy these documents back exactly how they were in the restore version, what will happen is they will have the exact same sequence number, right? So if I copy them back and then start replicating again, essentially all these restored emails or merged emails will be killed by the deletion stubs in my other replicas. So what we can do instead is we can actually say, I want to replicate these documents back. Again, this is a copy that is replication style. We do it in scanEZ, and I will increment the sequence numbers automatically so that I can make them stronger and make sure that they replicate over the environment. So let's do this, and let's actually put them back into a folder. We want to make sure that we selected the right file. We don't get fooled by the similar usernames again, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the copy. So what you can see is we actually created a folder because I provided a folder name that doesn't exist. We copied the 13 documents back, and if I go back to my notes client, we'll be able to locate the new folder that we just created with the restored emails for that specific user. And should we actually have any replicas, then these newly created documents would have been made stronger and actually replicate over the environment. So that is how you merge restored versions of mail files with your production databases with really not a lot of effort. Cool. So that's example number one. Let's head back to the presentation. Let's take a look at another one, which is actually very similar. So we'll use the same feature, but this is something that I hear from customers all the time. Say that a user deletes a bunch of folder designs, right? Not the emails, not the documents in those folders, just the folders themselves. So it means that the emails actually go into sort of a limbo. They're still in all documents, but they want to get those folders back and they want to get the same structure back. So let's see what we can do with this, because again, it's not the documents that know which folder they belong to, it's the folders that keep a list of note IDs for the documents that they contain. So how do we deal with this situation? It will be fairly similar, and this is actually where I mix it up a little bit because I used the mail file that I wanted to for this example. So in this particular case, we've got a mail file. I actually deleted a folder already, which was the development folder, but let's actually delete another one just so you guys can see how this works. I'm going to remove the folder. Of course, I get a warning that this is you can't really reverse this. And so we have two folders that we have removed. And of course, the documents are still here. So what are we going to do about this? Well, first of all, in this case, I know that the folders in question were management and development. But if I wanted to, I could actually use the deletion stub explorer to look at the deletion stubs created by these view design notes. In fact, I can see when they were deleted. These were the two that I have deleted today. So I can copy their unique IDs, head over to the restored version of the database, and then use the same search by unique ID feature to locate the view designs and figure out what were the view names in question, what were the folder names in question, right? So that is something that we could do because in the restored version of this database, these folders should still be alive. Now, we'll see that this is indeed the case. In fact, we can work with design elements in scanEZ just like as if they were documents. I can look at what they contain in terms of items and item values. So it's the development and management folders. Now, the next thing I want to know is what are the documents that are contained by these two folders. So I'm going to go ahead and use another search feature, the one that's called quickly retrieve contents of a view or folder. Now, this is a feature where I can actually select one or multiple views and or folders and quickly retrieve all of the documents that are in there. So I'm going to select the development and management folders. These are the ones that are deleted in production. And I'm going to create a My Selection folder with the documents that they contain. So what are we going to do here? Because I'm not looking at the actual folder designs that I want to restore. I'm looking at the actual documents that used to belong to them. Now, this is the trick. I'm going to go ahead and copy these documents back to the production replica. So let's quickly find this one with the same feature that we just used before. In fact, what we'll do is, this is the person in question. What we'll do is we'll actually do replicate documents and increment sequence numbers again. However, we'll say, let's get the folders from the source documents. Yeah? So what we'll do here is we'll go through the 24 documents. We'll find that they actually belong to the development and management folders. And we will see in the target database that those folders no longer exist. However, all the 24 documents actually exist in the target database. So when I copy these back, we'll overwrite the existing documents and we'll create the two folders and we'll deposit those documents back to the two folders. So this is how, instead of copying the two folder designs back, we copied their contents back and made sure that they go back into the exact same folders that they used to belong to. So there's my development folder with 20 documents in it, and there's my management folder with 4 documents in it. That is how you restore deleted folders to mail files with ease. So that was another example. Now, let's talk about folders a little bit more. This is an interesting one that came up with a consultant that we worked with. They had one of these folder guys, right? We all know these users that like to create hundreds or even thousands of folders in some cases. Now, what happens if you want to move folders within a structure? What if you want to move them from structure A to structure B? this is not really supported by notes, right? All that you can do is manual work. So how can we do this without any coding, and how does this stuff actually work? So in the particular scenario that we were looking at the time, I think the user wanted to move about 800 folders and all their contents, obviously. So let's take a look at what we can do with scanEZ to sort this out. Now, I'm going to pull up the database in question, which is going to be this one. We have a folder structure here that is folder 1 / and I've got a whole bunch of folders named like A1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Let's say that my objective here is to move all of these A folders from folder 1 to folder B to folder 2. So to see how this would actually work, let's take a look at what's in the background with scanEZ. Now, as you know, with scanEZ, you get everything that is inside the database, from documents to profile documents and deletion stubs, but you also get your designs. Now, it's not usually recommended to work too much with designs because you can easily break stuff, but folders are a happy exception. So not to actually say that you can't break folders, but in any case, if I look at the back end of what is inside a folder design note, we'll see that the only thing that's really responsible for its structure is a set of 2 items, the $name and the $title. If I change these, for example, to replace folder 1 with folder 2, we will actually change the structure. So when we know that, we can actually grab these folders, checkbox select them, and add them to a new My Selection folder, just so that we separate them so it's easier to work with. So let's call it folders. I always want to make sure that I don't leave anything checkbox selected so that I don't confuse things. I'm just going to close the design section, head over to my folders, and do a diff on them. Now, the diff functionality will do the same thing that it does with documents. It will give me all of the items across these designs, and I can see that all of them have the $name and the $title items. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use the search and replace feature. And what we're going to see here is we will just look for the string folder 1. We'll do a preview style replace, which essentially will show us the results so that we can approve it or cancel it before we make those changes. The old value for each of these is folder 1 / A1, and the new value is going to be folder 2 / A1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So this looks good to me. I will say apply all, and let's get those changes done. Now, because the folder designs themselves don't change, we'll keep the document assignment. They will keep the documents that are inside of them. We only change their name and thereby their structure. So let's see what we got here. And we can see that indeed folder 1 is empty now, and we moved our folders along with their document contents to folder 2. All right. So that's a quick example of how to manage and mass manage a lot of folders at one time. Cool. So that is another example. Let's go back to what we're looking at here. Fourth example, again, still with mail rules, but stick with me. We'll talk about non-mail related stuff in just a bit. Another thing that comes up a lot with our administration customers is managing mail rules, right? Whenever you pull up scanEZ on one of your mail servers, one of the things that always comes up is a whole bunch of mail rule related errors, not to mention the well-known situation where a specific mail rule that was deleted or disabled is still functional, it's still working, right? Now, if you do a bit of a search on how to fix that issue, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, the recommendation is that you delete the calendar profile, which I have to say would actually work, but it would be a bit like shooting a bird with a nuke, like not even a cannon, right? Because you lose so much data with that calendar profile. So let's take a look at how mail rules work and how to resolve this particular situation. This is actually one of my favorite things about scanEZ. Is these investigations when you can quickly look at, okay, how does this stuff work? What are the values in there? How can I fix this? So I'm going to pull up scanEZ on a mail file where I created a whole bunch of mail rules. And as you know, mail rules are primarily managed by mail rule documents. So when I look at my documents section on the left, we'll see that in fact, we have those mail rules as a specific type of document using a specific form, and we can quickly inspect what is inside them. So one of the things that we'll find here is the order num field. This is a unique value that identifies my mail rules by number. The other thing you see is that they have an enable field, which will be 1 for when the mail rule is actually functional and enabled, and 0 if it's not enabled. So there's a bunch of other stuff, because of course for these mail rules, the idea is that there is one or a set of conditions and then an action, and then all of this is actually translated to a formula, which is the $filter formula item. But what not a lot of people know is that it's actually not the mail rules that are responsible for what happens when the mail rule is active. It's that when you save that mail rule, it is written into your calendar profile. So let's do something quickly so that we get a bit of an overview of who's enabled and who isn't. I'm going to change the display title of these documents using a quick formula that I have created. So I'm going to use this one. It's actually super simple. I'm just going to use the order number, and then I will see if it's enabled or disabled, right? Then we're going to take a quick look at the calendar profile. Now, the calendar profile contains a whole bunch of items that start with $filter formula, and then there is an underscore and a number. And this is actually what identifies the translated or transmitted versions of those mail rules. So we can see that number 1 is enabled, but it actually isn't present on the calendar profile, which is an issue. Number 2 is disabled, and I don't see it on the calendar profile, so that's good. Number 3 is enabled, and it's on the calendar profile. This is cool. Same goes for number 4. And there is a number 5, which is actually a mail rule that was deleted, but it wasn't removed from the calendar profile. So this is the classic situation of when a mail rule is still active, but you can't find the mail rule documents in question. So the question presents itself, how do we fix this? Well, first of all, I've known a couple of end users that used to love creating hundreds of mail rules, right? So you can see how going through all of this sort of manually is a bit of a problem. For that, we have created a formula that will help you deal with this a little bit more effectively, which is going to be pretty big, so don't be afraid. This is all documented, and I will give you guys the resources after that, so you can find this formula on our tech lab. Essentially, what we do here is we use some view lookups to see what are the mail rule items that are missing. As we discussed, that would be mail rule number 1. And then what are the ones that are extraneous, as in we should remove them from the calendar profile. So if I wanted to fix this situation really quickly, I can just go ahead and remove number 5 by right-clicking it and deleting the field and saving my calendar profile, and we're done. Now, a little bit of an extra info here, which is, I think, pretty cool. When we looked at this at the time, and this was for a customer a couple of years ago, of course, we can fix it with scanEZ, but it just blew my mind that there was no recalculation feature that IBM would have done to take care of this automatically. So I went into the mailbox design and actually found a subroutine that does exactly what we're doing here, which is to go through all of the mail rule documents, look at their numbers, make sure that they're all represented well in the calendar profile, and if not, it would fix it. So this subroutine is actually in there, but the interesting question is, when does it get triggered? So it's not something that runs regularly. What I found was that the way to trigger this is to create a brand new mail rule and save it, okay? So that's when a complete recalculation of those mail rules happens. So to simplify things, if you ever have an issue with this, that's the first thing you want to try. You create a brand new mail rule, save it, which will trigger the recalculation and cleanup, and you should be good to go. For anything else, you always have scanEZ and can look at those actual calendar profiles and see what's going on. So that is how you deal with mail rules. Cool. So let's see where we are. So that was mail rules. Now let's go on to something else. So we're going to leave the mail topic here for a little bit. We'll talk a bit about HTTP passwords. This is also something that whenever we go on site and do a workshop or training for customers, we always look at a real environment. HTTP passwords are one of the most important possible bottlenecks from a domino security standpoint. It's not very well documented, but there's actually 3 possible versions of HTTP password hashes. As a quick recap, hashing is the algorithm that turns your plain text password into a ciphertext. But the way that this works is very different across those 3 different versions, making the older ones extremely vulnerable to brute force attacks. So it's very important that you make sure that you're up to date with the latest versions of these hashes. But what does this all mean? How does it all work? And how do we do a quick audit of this using scanEZ? Let's head over back to the environment and let's pick an application here I created for these password hashes. So what are we talking about here? If I pull up a document quickly as an example, which I can always do with scanEZ just by selecting it in the view, we're talking about the HTTP password field, right? This is a text type field that contains the hashed version of these passwords. Now, to understand the main difference, I said there was actually 3 different versions, but the major issue is with version 1, which was introduced, I think, before version 4 or version 6, depending on what documentation you rely on. The major issue here is when the @password formula is being used. So let me show you why. What I'm using here is the formula evaluation feature that I really love. It definitely saves so much time. So I can use a quick formula and evaluate it in this document's context. So I'm going to use an @password formula to get the hash version of this string, right? So my plain text is password, and this is the output that I get. This is the oldest version of that hash. And the problem with it is that every time I evaluate this, it results in the exact same ciphertext. So what that actually means is that if I find multiple users with the same ciphertext, by definition, they have the exact same passwords, which will make it pretty easy to guess those passwords. Now, unless you have the extended ACLs feature enabled, any simple user can create a view on your NAB, even though it might be stored in their local desktop NDK, where they would just categorize those user person documents by the HTTP password field, and that would let them find any users with the exact same password if this is the version that you're using. Now, as opposed to this, the later versions of the hashing algorithm, for example, @hashPassword, which gives us a password hash compatible with Domino 6 and later, ridiculous that we have to talk about this, but still, this is a salted hash algorithm, which means that every time I run the algorithm, there is a variable that will make the output different. So it means there's no way to actually find the exact same password across users if this is the algorithm that's being used. So that's kind of the basics. Let's see how we can get a quick audit of this situation in our names and address book. So I'm going to go ahead and select my person documents in the NAB, which is about 1,500 something. I'm going to do a diff on them, which in turn, again, gives me a list of every item across my person documents. I'm going to select the HTTP password field, and I'm going to use the values feature to quickly read out their values and look at it in our FlexiGrid. Now, when I make this column bigger, we can see that the length actually differs between person documents, and this is the primary indicator of a version difference in terms of the hashing algorithm. So what we can do is we can actually use a custom column. I'm going to call it version, and I have created a quick formula to look at the version. So we're looking at the length of these password hashes, and that is what we're using when we hit evaluate to figure out what are the password hash versions for these particular person documents. So we can see that there's 273 person documents with a length of 52 characters. This is what represents the latest version of the hashing algorithm. And then there is still a whole bunch of them that are using salted hashes, but they're a bit shorter, so they're a bit more insecure. And there is 15 users that not only use the oldest version, but actually have the same passwords across them. So you think it would be hard to figure out what this password is? Let's take a look. I'm going to select these person documents and I'm going to add them to a new My Selection folder. We're going to call it weak passwords, and I'm going to hit OK on that. Now we have a new My Selection folder with those person documents on the left, and I'm actually just going to pick one of them since all of them have the same password. So we're going to again use the formula evaluation feature, and I'm going to use something like this. So we're going to see if when we compute this with the @password string, do we get the same thing? No, we don't. What if I change it to a lowercase because it needs to be something super simple? Well, there we go. So these are the 15 users that are actually using the password and with a very, very weak hash. So what can we do with this? Well, what we could do for starters is we could actually do a def on these users and then locate the HTTP password field, and we could modify that field using the @hash password formula. In fact, the @hash password that will upgrade these fields to a newer version while leaving the password exactly the same, right? So I can do this, and when I hit apply, we're gonna evaluate this in every document's context, and we're gonna keep the password the same, but at least when I use this field as title now, we'll see that it's always different for every one of these users, which is better, right? But what we should really do to fix this situation is a combination of two things. First, in the actions menu in our names and address book, we want to edit the directory profile, and we want to select the secure internet passwords that are compatible with Domino 8 or higher. But the really cool thing, or the interesting thing here, is that this is not going to be enough because it will not upgrade those password hashes right away. What we need to do is select every user, go to actions, and actually upgrade them to a more secure internet password, which is right here. We can select the version, and when we hit OK, those users should not notice anything, but the hashes should be updated automatically. Otherwise, what we set in the directory profile is, for example, if we say we want to use the version 3, the latest hashes, that will only take effect if those user documents, if those person documents are modified. Okay, so that is how you do a quick audit of your password hashes and how you get everything updated. Cool. So let's see where we were. We looked at the HTTP password hashes situation. I'm actually not doing that bad because we're at halftime and we've done 5 examples. So that's kind of according to the plan. I'm going to take a quick look at the questions, but I think that some of my colleagues are actually answering them. So that's cool. Okay. There is a question from Rob, but Rob will get back to you on that. There is actually a feature that allows you to select the folder design. We'll get back to you on that. Cool. Okay, so next scenario. What about conflicts, right? So we all know conflicts. They happen due to replication or save events, but there is actually a couple different scenarios that we want to address here. So if you have a couple of individual conflicts, right? You look at a database and there's a few of them. What you can do is you can use the scanEZ conflict solver to look at the difference between those documents, compare your parent with the conflict. And I think that's a major improvement as opposed to what you usually have without scanEZ, which is a binary choice. You either delete the conflict or you delete the parent, but then you have to remove the $conflict field and $ref to get that stuff sorted out. What we give you for individual conflicts is a really cool overview of what are the differences. You make your choice and then get those documents merged. So you go from a binary choice to actually being able to decide what are the items that you need from each of those documents. However, there's another situation, and we see this quite often with customers, is that you look at a database and you find hundreds, if not thousands of conflicts, right? Now, in that particular scenario, what's really important is to first realize that it's probably not because there's thousands of users editing various documents at the same time. These things are usually created by replication events or an automatic process such as an agent. And so you can actually find a pattern that will help you decide how you want to deal with them. So we're going to take a look at both of these situations and we'll see how to sort it out with scanEZ. All right, so for the first one, which is individual conflicts, I'm going to use this database right here. This is my employee salaries database. As you know, we have a whole bunch of tools available in scanEZ. One of those, and I think this is the most popular one, is the conflict solver. So when it comes to just a few conflicts, you can actually see them here in the drop-down list, as well as you can see them right away on the left, where not only do you see how many conflicts you have, but also how many conflicts belong to each parent document. So here, I've got an interesting one that actually has 3 conflicts that belong to the same parent document. So let's pull up the conflict solver and see what we can do with this. Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click show only fields with different values between documents, right? So this is what's going to actually narrow it down to the actual fields that are different. We can see that there are major differences here because this user probably switched departments or something else. So I can select whichever values I want to keep. I want to keep the US here. I want to keep USD. However, manufacturing is correct. So again, as opposed to just being able to decide whether I want to keep the parent or the conflict, I can actually go ahead and combine them according to what's important to me. So when I hit solve, we'll combine the documents, we'll merge the item values, and then remove the conflict. And this is the other one that's more interesting. What we see, however, is that when we look at the different field values, there's actually no significant difference. It's just the nomenclature. So what we can do is we can keep the CA because that's what I want to keep in this database. And in this case, when I hit solve, we'll just remove those 3 conflict documents. And with that, we resolved every conflict in the database. I kept this short and sweet because I think most of you guys have used this before, and it's really very self-explanatory. So let's focus more on the situation where you have a lot more conflicts. So I do have a lot more conflicts in my employee directory database, which I can quickly pull up. Mind you, I created all of these manually this morning. So that's a pretty funny part of my job, actually. I'm just going to go ahead and reinitialize this database real quick, if that is something that I can do. So there is about 30 something conflicts in this database, right? And what we're going to see, let's pretend that that's actually like 100 different conflicts. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up the conflict solver, and we'll see that indeed we have a whole bunch of them. So when you have a lot of conflicts, like I said, it's usually not because of individual users. So you want to find a pattern that will let you deal with these conflicts in bulk, as opposed to having to go through all of them one by one. So the example here is going to be pretty simple, but when we see the situation live, it's usually very, very similar. So when I look at the first one and focus on fields that have different values, what I see here is that the only difference is that the conflict actually contains a server name for the mail server, where the parent document doesn't. Now, I could actually jump to the next one by selecting it here, but I'm going to show you guys a trick that actually saves my bacon so many times, which is that if I put the focus onto the drop down, I can actually use my down arrow to switch between my conflicts. And so that makes it really, really quick to go through these conflicts and actually be sure that this is the pattern that I'm looking at, which means that most likely I'll be able to deal with these conflicts, except for this one, because there's actually some differences here. I'm going to just hit solve and get these guys done. I can deal with these conflicts all at once, because what I want to do for all of them is to keep the conflict and remove the parent. So what are we going to do about this? How do we solve this en masse? Essentially, we found the pattern. So now let's see how we deal with this. The pattern tells us that what we want to do is remove the parent and keep the conflict. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to use a formula search, and I'm going to look for is available $conflict. Now this is going to locate the 25 conflict documents, right? However, these are just the conflict documents, not the parents. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to select this my selection, and we're going to say, I think it's actually the checkbox selections, checkbox selection, and we're going to find the parents. So when we do that, actually, it's been some time. No, it's going to be right here. So add any parents. I did a right click actually. So add any parents to my selection if applicable, right? So that is what we're going to do. And we're going to create one for those parent documents. What we see is that the number of parents in this case corresponds to the number of conflicts, but we'll see that all of these guys contain the $conflict and the $ref fields, right? What we established is that we want to keep those conflicts. We can see that the parent response hierarchy is managed pretty well. I can right away see that there is a parent here. I can go to the parent and I can see that there is a response to it. So that is how we deal with the parent response situation. And what I want to do is I want to delete the parent and keep the conflict. So the first thing to do is actually pretty simple. I'm going to go ahead and delete these documents. Using the delete documents in this category. I could actually delete them without creating deletion stubs if I wanted to, but that's not what I want now. So I'm just going to remove them like that. And this is where we are at the edge of a dangerous situation, which is that if I was to leave things as they are, then these would actually be orphaned response documents plus with a $conflict field. So what I want to do is I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and do a diff on these conflict documents, and I'm going to select the $ref and $conflict items, and I'm going to delete these two items alone from all of my conflict documents. So we just turned them into the new parent and the winner document, and we remove the parent. So that's how you go from analyzing a whole bunch of conflicts together to figuring out what is the pattern and how do you actually resolve things. Now, needless to say, if what we found would have been that it's the conflicts that need to go, it would have been easier to resolve. So that's why I picked a little bit more of a complex scenario. Great, so that was conflict. Now, let's talk about something else that's a little bit similar. Let's talk about duplicates. We can talk about duplicates not only for mails, but for any sort of custom applications, right? So what if we have duplicate emails? How do we locate those duplicate emails and get rid of them? What if we have a custom app that has duplicate documents? How can we use scanEZ to get rid of this? I added this point because I think this is super important, and I see that with most of the customers that I visit or work with are not usually familiar with how this works. So let's take a look. Before we actually head into the scenario, one thing is very important to say, which is that duplicates is not like conflicts, because conflicts is a natural situation for a notes document, and it's super easy to spot those conflicts. They have a $conflict item. Duplicates are relative, right? So duplicates are duplicates to you because you know that, for example, for emails, they have the exact same message ID and subject and posted date, right? So with duplicates, we always need to define what it is that makes them duplicates, and then scanEZ can help. So I'm going to quickly look at two different scenarios. We'll look at a mail file and some duplicate emails, and we'll look at a custom application and how to sort this out. So for the mails, I'm going to use Angela's mailbox, where I've got not just one, but a whole bunch of duplicates. So I've got like 3 duplicates here. I've got like 5 for some of the other emails. How do we deal with this? Well, like I said, we need to establish what it is that makes them duplicates. So for emails, if I was to say, I just want to look at the subject field, that would not be enough, because I could easily have emails with the exact same subject field value, and they would not be duplicates. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do a diff, and I will change the display title of these documents using a formula. Now, the formula can be a number of things. In this case, I'm going to stick with something pretty simple. I'm going to use the $message ID. I'm going to add to that the subject, and I will do a text conversion of the posted date items, right? You could actually get much more sophisticated here, but let's just stick with this. Now, as you see, there are a few emails that look very, very similar, but the value is so long that it's hard to see if it's exactly the same. So what we can do is we can use our hashing knowledge. In fact, this is something I do quite often, is because we know that if we take this value and we use the add password on that value, if the value is the same, we'll get the same output, but it will be shorter. So when I hit OK, we can now see that this is the hash version of those emails and the concatenation of these values. And after that, we can use the duplicate finder feature in scanEZ, which is nothing else, but in the right-click menu, I will say select all with identical display title. In fact, I'm just going to leave everything as it is because I want to separate my duplicate emails. So we checkbox selected 120 duplicate emails, and I'm going to add them to a new My Selection that I'm going to call duplicates. Great. Again, I'm going to make sure that I deselect everything so that it doesn't cause any confusion. This is my selection where I've got all of the duplicate emails. You can see that for this one, there's 2, 4, 6 versions of this email that are exactly the same. So how do we deal with this? Well, in this case, if I wanted to be sure that this is exactly the same, I could select and checkbox select them, in fact, and I could go ahead and from the checkbox selection menu, I could actually use the compare feature that will look at everything across these emails, and we can actually be sure that these are indeed the same emails. The subject, the body, everything else is the same, and then we can proceed with getting rid of them. Now, one thing that's important is that, for example, this particular email where I have 6 versions of them, I don't want to remove all of them because I want to leave one of them in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click this My Selection and say, select all with identical display title. Same thing we did earlier, but I'm going to select this one, which is to skip the first matches. What this will do is it will leave the first version of this email unselected, and it will select all the duplicates only. So what this allows me to do is I can go to checkbox selection and remove those documents, leaving only one version of these emails in the mailbox. All right, so that is how you deal with duplicate emails. Now, if we want to talk about a custom application where this might be the situation, we can use, for example, this application. If I look at my views here, I can see that there are actually duplicate user entries in here. Now, this is fairly familiar or similar to the names and address book, but it's still a custom application. So how do we get rid of these duplicate person documents in here? Well, let's pull up scanEZ real quick. And let's actually take a look at what it is that identifies these documents as duplicates. I'm going to, first of all, select every person document here on the left, and I'm going to do a diff on them to see what sort of items I can work with. I'm going to use the first name, last name, manager, and yearly gross salary as an identifier, and I'm going to quickly use, I just used the Control-T shortcut to set the display titles. I'm going to use a formula for this. So we're going to do first name, last name, manager, and let's do a text on the salary information. Let's see if this actually works. I think it should. So I'm just talking about my formula here. All right, so this is still pretty long, right? So why don't we use the same trick that we used before? Again, it's a different application, but we're going to use the same strategy, which is to use an add formula to get those password hashes, get the hashed version that's a little bit shorter so that we can deal with these documents. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to, again, use the select all with identical display title feature. Once again, I'm not going to skip the first matches right away. I just want to separate my documents and add them to a new My Selection. And from this point on, the set of actions required is exactly the same as what we saw before, which is that we want to analyze, we want to be sure that those are actually duplicates, one of the things you want to do is you want to do a diff on them and make sure that there's no dollar conflict, because that would mean that at least one of these duplicate situations has to do with a conflict and not actually a duplicate. So in here, that is not the case. I could still grab some of these and compare their values. And once I made sure that these are actually mere duplicates, I can use the select all with identical display title feature that will use the display titles, skip the first matches, and then remove all of the duplicates. As you can see, some of them even have more than one duplicate document in there. And so again, I can get rid of it using the checkbox selection menu and the delete documents feature. So that is how you deal with duplicates in both mail and custom applications. And that was example number 7. We have 2 more to go. I don't want to jinx it, but we're looking good so far. So next one is ghost documents. I will keep this rather short because this is an issue that should be completely solved and preventable by now using the purge interval replication control feature, but it's still something that comes up with customers off and on. So the idea here is you have a production database on some of your servers, and then suddenly you notice a whole bunch of old documents coming back to this database that you have deleted a long time ago, right? So what happens here? Basically, what tends to happen is that you have a user who goes on a long vacation or a sick leave and keeps their local laptops with them. And when they come back after months and months, and usually longer than 3 months, they start replicating their local replicas again. And so the server version that kept deletion stubs for some of those documents that have been deleted in the meantime only keeps deletion stubs for the standard 90 days. So these documents that come back after half a year of being deleted are going to be considered as new documents, right? And so it can be really tedious to try and find and get rid of these documents. Let's see how we can do this with scanEZ. So it's super simple. I'm going to use this application here because it's our trouble application where we've got a combination of all the possible problems that we've seen in the past 20 years, and we packed it in here. Well, it's actually working so well that the server seems to actually be down, which is weird. That is weird. I think I just might have had a crash here. All right, you guys have to take my word for it, I guess. I'm gonna just come back here and see if I can find a replica real quick. So let's see, yep, it looks like I can do that. So let's pull up that replica and see what we get here. All right, there we go. So I'm going to pull up the database in scanEZ, and the tool that we're going to use here is actually an awesome tool for 2 different reasons. We can use the post replication auditor to find these ghost documents, as well as to answer some pretty basic questions, such as what happened in this database since this morning, right? It sounds like a super simple question, but it's much harder to actually answer it than that. So when I hit audit in the database, I could actually select a date. I could pick a date and time and say, show me everything that happened in this database, including what was modified, what came into the database since this morning, as well as we can say, I want to audit the ghost documents. So show me these ghost documents. What we're doing here is essentially, we're looking at 2 different dates. Well, a little bit more than that, but essentially 2 different dates. We're looking at the initial creation of documents and designs for that matter. And we're looking at the added in this file date as well. So we're looking at when the document was born and when the document was first added into this database, right? And so if the difference between those is larger than 90 days, we say we have an issue. In fact, it's not as simple as that, because of course, if I create a new replica of a very old database, that would already trigger this. So that's why not only do we calculate the difference with the difference between the first and the initial creation and in this file creation, we also add to that the difference with the database creation. So that is how we can identify these ghost documents. And after that, it's really up to you what you want to do with it. You can add these guys into a new My Selection and analyze them. You can delete them off directly, or you can actually copy these guys and figure out their unique IDs and track them across your replicas using replication easy to figure out what was the entry point into the environment, and then figure out using the user activity who the user was that's responsible for this. So that's how you locate your ghost documents. Now, I do want to say that ghost documents, like I said, can be prevented from happening and should be, in fact. And it's actually super simple how. In the replication options section, you can set the purge interval replication control on the Space Savers tab. So when you enable that, when this replica is about to receive documents from a foreign replica, it will right away check for whether these documents were created over 90 days ago, and it will not let those suspicious documents in. It's an amazing feature. However, you need to enable it database by database, so it doesn't replicate. So that is why you do need a tool like Database Easy or Replication Easy to make sure that this feature, the perk feature, is enabled on most of your databases, at least the critical system databases like names.nsf across your servers. So that is how we deal with the ghost document situation. And there is one more thing that I wanted to talk about here, just with a couple minutes left, which is to look at replica differences. This is one of the features that I use all the time, is to be able to use scanEZ and compare replicas to figure out what are the differences between multiple replicas. So I'm going to just do this and pull up scanEZ on a production database. I'm going to use the local replica because one of my servers is down at the moment. I'm going to reinitialize scanEZ, which basically just does a refresh. And I'm going to use the tools replication auditor feature. The replication auditor is a really cool visual way to select another replica. It goes for individual replicas. So it will work with 2 replicas at a time. Now I'm comparing my server with my local replica, and then we can audit differences or actually look at everything that is inside these databases and look at what is the difference. So these are 2 databases that I haven't replicated on purpose. And what you can see is we show you everything on the local replica on the right-hand side and everything on the server replica on the left-hand side. In the middle, we show you the result of our calculation. Now, for those of you using Domino 10, this is fairly similar, if not a lot more awesome, sorry about that, than the new -L feature for the replica task, which gives you a list of the differences and what should be replicated. I'm saying it's a lot more awesome because we actually tell you what is the sequence number of these items, as well as we tell you all the creation dates. We tell you, is it a document, is it a design, etc. And then we calculate what should happen should we replicate. You can see that there is different categories. So we have a creation that should take place. We have a push delete. Actually, these are the conflicts that we resolved, right? So the conflict documents that we have removed, or was it the parent documents, doesn't matter. So these will be replicated and overriding those documents in the target database. And there is a couple of updates, which are going to be the conflict documents because we updated them. So their sequence number is greater when we remove the $conflict and the $ref items. So that is the replication auditor. What's really cool about it is that you can actually influence this a little bit as well, right? So if I was to say that these deletions should actually not happen, I do not want to replicate these deletions, then what I could do is I could remove the deletion stubs from the server database by simply saying I want to delete the documents on Acme 10, which will remove the deletion stubs. And so the next time I replicate without a replication history present, we will get those documents back. All right. So you do have a way to influence replication as well as to better understand it with the replication auditor. Now, I know this was just a few scenarios, and I really, really hope that you enjoyed what you saw and everybody learned a little bit of something. I would love to hear from you guys. And a couple of things that are important. I know we were pretty fast with some of this stuff, but actually a lot of it is documented. First of all, if you saw a lot of things that you couldn't follow with scanEZ, we have 2 scanEZ master classes that really focus on the foundations of scanEZ, how to work with documents and how to work with some of the tools. So these 2 are available on our website, and you can stream it at any time you want. I think they're fairly short. I mean, they're probably around an hour or something, but not longer than that. And most of the scenarios that we talked about here are actually documented on our tech lab as well in a step-by-step form. So feel free to go check that out. Would love to hear from you. You're going to see a poll, I think. Please be kind with me, but let us know what you thought in any case. And we're always happy to help. So if there's any questions that you might think of later on, if there's any scenarios that you'd love to see in a future webinar, reach out to us, send an email, or check out our website. And again, thank you guys for attending. Have a great rest of your days.